Myself Pushpendra Singh, and we are going to start with our daily current affairs. All right, so today we are going to start with our daily current affairs for 23rd of January 2021. And here we are basically covering the current affairs portion for various competitive examinations, like the civil services examination conducted by the UPSC. All right, so here we are basically referring the two national newspapers. You can also refer these two national newspapers. All right, the first is basically the Hindu, and the second is Indian Express. So you can refer these two national newspapers. The Hindu, it is the first newspaper, and the second is Indian Express. All right, both of these newspapers are equally good. You can refer any of these newspapers, right? And you can basically read both of these also. Few people read both of these newspapers, but you must understand that the cumulative time for covering these two newspapers should not exceed by more than 1.5 hours. So that means in 1.5 hours you should finish both of these newspapers. Ideally, the one newspaper or one single newspaper, right, should cover in 45 minutes to 1 hour. Ideally it should be covered, right? It should not exceed more than this time. All right, so let's begin with the news. Okay, so the news first is about the Jyomoti Konwari. So Jyomoti Konwari was basically, a princess of Ahom kingdom, right, which is basically located in the Assam. So here the referring the news basically for the princess whose name was Jyomoti Konwari. So here the news basically flashing for this for about this princess is the Prime Minister Narendra Modi basically going to visit the Assam on January 23rd, right? And this the historic venue for the Modi's program, or where the Modi is going to conduct a program, right, is a basically historic Jarnaga Pothar. The historic Jarnaga Pothar is basically where the queen basically lost her life, right, for saving her husband and the kingdom. So here it is the venue, right, or it is, you can say, it is an open field, right, which is there in the Assam region, and where the queen basically lost, or the princess basically lost her life. So it is a historic Jarenga Portha, right? It is basically a field, right, where she lost the life in the Upper Assam's Sivsagar district. All right, and this region, which is basically known for the sacrifice of the princess called the Jyomoti Konwari, was basically also known as Rangpur, which is basically located in the Sivsagar district of Assam. And this region, which is also known as Rangpur in the Sivsagar, it was basically the important seat of the powerful Ahom dynasty. So where the Ahom dynasty basically ruled the Assam region for 6th century continuously, from 1228 AD to 1826 AD. So the Ahom dynasty basically ruled the Assam region and the adjacent region. And as I told you that the Jarenga Pothar, where, right, the Modi is going to have the inauguration is basically an open field in the Sivsagar town, right, or in the Sivsagar district of Assam, and it is basically popularly connected with the 17th century Ahom princess whose name was Jyomati, right? So the popularly, the princess basically lost or sacrificed her life. So she was basically tortured to death, and that place, it is known as Jarenga Potha. So the place where the princess basically lost her life and she was tortured to death, at that place, which is known as the Jarenga Pothar. The Jarenga Pothar is basically an open field in the Sivsagar town. As I told you, it is a field, and which is basically popularly connected to this 17th century Ahom princess, right? All right, and let's understand about the Jyomoti Konwari. As I told you, the Jyomoti Konwari was basically a princess. So she was basically the wife of the Tahi Ahom prince known the Gadapani. The Gadapani was basically a prince of the Ahom dynasty, which ruled the Assam region in the basically in the 12th to 17th century, right? And she was basically a wife of that Ahom prince whose name was the Gadapani, and she was basically accorded with the honorific, right, Mohini, right? That was basically the honor which was accorded to the Jyomoti Konwari on the account of her historic endurance of torture, right? She has faced, right, at the end of, the rivals, or at the hand of the royalists under the Sulifa Laura Roja, who was basically, she was refused to disclose, about the whereabouts, about, the exiled husband prince, who was also known as Gadapani, whereabouts. And because of that, she basically, helped her husband to rise in the revolt and assume the kingship later. Obviously, the queen basically sacrificed, or the princess basically sacrificed her life to save to save her, the husband, as well as, she was also, did not disclose about the whereabouts of the princess, which is whereabouts of the prince that called Gadapani. And the Gadapani, who was basically a prince, and the Jomati was basically a princess, their son Rudra Singha, right, had Joysagar tank dug at the spot where she was basically tortured, right? So their son basically, dug a tank, right? And that was called basically Joysagar tank, where she was basically tortured and put to the death. All right, you can see here, she the princess, right, and she was tortured to death by, some of the royalists, right, who basically, wanted to capture and, to take over the kingdom from them. All right, next, the Haripura. The Haripura, you might have heard about also in the modern history books, right? The Haripura basically is a session, right, is a place, or you can say it's a village nearby, in the Surat district of Gujarat, right? So in the Surat district, there is a small village that is called Haripura, right? The Haripura is in news because you must understand that, uh, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi also, reminisced the Haripura in the Gujarat, a significant venue for the Netaji's political journey. All right. So as you know that 23rd of January is basically celebrated as a Parakram Divas for marking the birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. So it was basically recently decided by the government of India, right? The 23rd of January, which will be celebrated, right, as a Parakram Divas, right, to commemorate the birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, right, to celebrate, his, the lifelong, struggle for the independence of this country. And the Prime Minister Narendra Modi basically reminisced about the Haripura in the Gujarat, right? The Haripura is also known for the significant venue in the Netaji's political journey, because here at the Haripura session, the Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose basically, he became, the chairperson, or he became, the president of Indian National Congress in 1938. All right. So let's understand about the Haripura. So as I told you, Haripura is a village which is located near Kadod town, a Kadod town located in the Surat district of Gujarat. All right. And the Haripura is basically located on the bank of River Tapti, which basically flows through the Surat district. All right, let's understand about the Haripura session. As you have heard about the Haripura session also in your modern history books. So let's understand about the Haripura session. So during independence movement, where, the people were struggling, for the independence, it was the venue for the Indian National Congress, or INC, right? The venue in 1938 was the Haripura. It was a village in the district of Surat. So in 1938, right, the session for the Indian National Congress, which was referred as the Haripura session, right, which was referred as the Haripura session, because the session was held at the Haripura in the Surat district. All right. And the Indian National Congress, you might have, uh, learned about this in your modern history book, that the Indian National Congress basically met in the Haripura during 19 to 22nd February 1938, right? So it was the time when, the Indian National Congress basically meet, right, for its annual session, right? And and the president for this Haripura session was Subhash Chandra Bose, because he was elected as a president of the Haripura Congress session in 1938. All right. So he was basically, the president of the Indian National Congress in 1938. So he was elected basically a president, right, of the Haripura session, which was conducted in 1938. All right. Let's understand about the next news, that is Shri Narayana Guru. So already you know about Sri Narayana Guru. The Sri Narayana Guru basically belongs to Kerala, first of all, right? He was basically, he belongs to the Ezwa caste, which is basically also considered as a untouchable, right? And the Sri Narayan Guru was basically also known as a philosopher, spiritual leader, and a social reformer in our country. All right. So the news which is flashing about the Sri Narayan Guru is that the Vice President Venkaiah Naidu basically launched a book of the poems, right, which is titled as Not Many But One. So it is basically the book which consisting of the poems. The title of the book is basically Not Many But One. So it is basically, or they are the two volumes, right? The English translation of these poems, right, which was composed by Sri Narayana Guru, was done by Professor G.K. Sasidharan, right? The Professor G.K. Sasidharan basically translated into the English, right? So English translation was done, and this book was basically launched by Vice President of India, Venkaiah Naidu. All right, let's understand about the Narayana Guru. So Narayana Guru was basically born in 1855 and he died in 1928. And he was basically a philosopher, a spiritual leader, and a social reformer in our country. And as I told you that he was born in basically in an untouchable family. So he was basically belongs to the Ezwa caste, which was considered as a untouchable. All right. And regarding his contribution, what he had made the contribution is that, right, he led a reform movement against the injustice which is basically caused, right, in the caste ridden society. So that caste related, the problems are throughout our country. Even today also our country is facing the caste related problems. So on that time there was injustice met to the, untouchables, or the people belongs to the lower strata or of the society. So the reform movement was started by the, Narayana Guru on that time against such injustice, especially in the Kerala, right? The ultimate aim is to promote the spiritual enlightenment and the social equality, because according to him, right, every caste, right, have the similar status and no one is above and below, against each other, right? And also Sri Narayana Dharma Paripalna Yogam, which is also known as SNDP Yogam, right, which is a basically, Indian spiritual organization. The ultimate purpose of this organization, which is also known as SNDP, is to promote the spiritual enlightenment and social equality, right? That was basically founded by Dr. Padmanabhan Palpu, Dr. Padmanabhan Palpu in 1903, right, under the guidance of Sri Narayana Guru. The main aim of SNDP is to basically, to uplift the people, right, especially the Ezwa communities or the TR community, which was considered as untouchable in the region, right? All right. And he was also a participated in the vacuum satyagraha in 1924 and 1925, right? So under his guidance, right, he basically led a social protest, right? So social protest was organized in the erstwhile the Travancore, right, in the Kerala, right? So the erstwhile Travancore, the social protest was organized under the guidance of Narayana Guru against the untouchability and the caste discrimination, right? So a lot of rampant untouchability and the caste discrimination that was there in the Kerala, right? Especially in the Hindu fold of the society, right? So Narayana Guru himself, involved in this Becom Satyagraha, and extended the much cooperation, right? To basically, to remove the untouchability and the caste discrimination in the Hindu society, right? And the Narayana Guru also published the 45 works in the Malayalam, Sanskrit, Tamil languages, right? And some of the few works which was very known, right, or which was very famous was the the Atmopedesa Satkam, which is basically the 100 verse spiritual poem, and Deva Dasakam, which is basically a universal prayer in the 10 verses, right? These works are very, very famous, right, for, right, in the memory of, the Narayana Guru, who was basically a spiritual leader and the social reformer, right? And he is basically the, the Narayana Guru. He was basically known for the social upliftment of the Ezba community or untouchable community in the Kerala. All right. Next, the smart anti-airfield weapon. So that is called SAW, smart anti-airfield weapon. So let's understand what is that first of all. I'll give you a basic clue. What is that smart airfield weapon, anti-airfield weapon? So first of all, it's a weapon. It's a basically precisely guided weapon, right? Which is basically used to destroy right, some of the infrastructure which is basically associated with airfield. For example, the infrastructure basically radars, runways, right, and all associated, infrastructure which is basically used for, some sort of air operations. So the smart anti-airfield weapon basically used for destroying that infrastructure which is associated with the air power, right? So here the DRDO, or Defense Research and Development Organization, basically successfully conducted the captive and the release trial of indigenously developed the smart anti-airfield weapon. So as its name itself is anti-airfield, so that means every infrastructure associated with the airfield, including the runways, radar system, it will be destroyed by this SAW, which is smart anti-airfield weapon, right? And this weapon, uh, and this weapon called SAW was tested from the Hawk, right, of the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited off the coast of Odisha. So it was successfully tested, right? So it was successfully tested, and it is the ninth successful mission, right? It is the ninth successful mission of the SAW, which was conducted by the DRDO till now, right? So it has a huge and immense success in destroying, some sort of airfield weapons, right? And as I told you, it is a smart weapon, and it is successfully test fired from the Indian Hawk MK132, right, of the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. Okay, as I told you that the SAW is basically indigenously designed and developed by DRDO's Research Center Emarat, right, which is RCI and which is located in Hyderabad region, right? So it is basically indigenously developed and the design, and it is a huge success for the DRDO as it is successfully tested ninth time, and it is basically 125 kg smart weapon, right? And it is basically capable of engaging the ground enemy airfield assets. So as I already told you that all sort of associated infrastructure which is related to the airfield assets. So it is capable of engaging the enemy airfield assets. These assets are for example the radars, bunkers, the taxi tracks, runways, right? So these are basically some of those, the assets which are used, right, by the enemy, right, for attacking the, the other country. So if we are capable of destroying the radars, bunkers, right, where, the men or, the military personnel basically, the hide radars basically used for, detection of the incoming, the missile or incoming of, any sort of a, the plane or the fighter plane, the taxi tracks, runways, which is basically used by the aircraft, right, to launch an operation, right? So this SAW can have the range of around 100 kilometers, right? So it will cover the range of 100 kilometers, and it is basically a very high precision guided bomb, right, which is also lightweight as compared to the weapon system of the same class. So it is very lightweight system, right, when you compare with the weapon system of the same class. All right, so you see basically it is basically fitted with the Hawk, right? And here it is basically this, I'm talking about this bomb. So you see basically this is the bomb which is basically, the smart guided bomb which will basically destroy such, anti-airfield weapons. All right, let's understand the next news, that is production linked incentive scheme. So first of all, you must understand, as the name suggests, production linked. So that means it is a incentive scheme, right, which shall incentivize some production. So first of all, this production in linked incentive scheme is associated with, right, the promotion of the domestic manufacturing of the critical bulk drugs, right? So here the critical bulk drugs, for their promotion, for their manufacturing, right, the production linked incentive scheme was basically, uh, approved, right, to the drug firms, especially including, right, the Aurobindo Pharma and the Karnataka Antibiotics and the Pharmaceuticals under the PLI scheme, right? So these drugs firms have been approved, right? Government has given its approval under the PLI schemes to these two principal drug firms or pharmaceutical firms, the Aurobindo Pharma and the Karnataka Antibiotics and the Pharmaceuticals, for the promotion of the domestic manufacturing of critical bulk drugs, right? So here you must understand what is the significance of these critical bulk drugs. So first of all, you must understand these drugs are very much critical for the production of some of the vital, drugs, right? For example, almost all drugs needed basically the active pharmaceutical ingredients, right? That is called API. But you must understand, the India is basically import dependent on the API, especially from China. 85%, right? Around 85% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients are basically imported by India, and majority of it's basically, dependent on the China. So China is the greater, exporter of this active pharmaceutical ingredient. So one aspect of this production linked incentive scheme is basically to reduce you know the dependence on the China, right, for these active pharmaceutical ingredients in our country. And the second is basically it also aimed at the promotion of the domestic manufacturing of these critical key starting materials or the drug intermediates, right, which is basically used for manufacturing of the drugs. All right. And how would you achieve that critical drugs would be, or these intermediates, or such type of, the active pharmaceutical ingredients will be manufactured. So here the greenfield plants will be set up. What is the greenfield plants? First of all, they are, those plants or those manufacturing units which will be constructed, right, in an entirely new piece of the land with a fresh, with a fresh investment. And that plant or that manufacturing unit would be, operationalized to produce that ingredients, right, that will be used for, for the production of the medicines or for the drugs, right? So these, greenfield plants will have the minimum domestic value addition of the four different target segments, right? These, will have the total outlay of the cumulatively around 6,940 crore, right? This total outlay for the period of 2020-21 to 2029 and 30, right? So it will have the total outlay of 6,940 crore for these 10 years. For these 10 years, so it will be used, right, as the, the outlay for the development of these greenfield plants. And this scheme basically is launched by the Department of the Pharmaceutical, Ministry of Chemicals and the Fertilizers, right? That scheme was basically launched by this department. All right. And the target segment, that is one which include the four eligible products under the scheme. The four eligible products are basically penicillin G, right? The 7-ACA, the, erythromycin thiocyanate, that is TIOC, and basically clavulanic acid, right, which is basically, country or India is basically fully import dependent for these drugs. So the first segment or the first target segment basically, focusing on these four eligible products, and these are basically considered on the priority as per the decided evaluation and the selection criteria, right? And here the setting up of the plant under the scheme will lead to the total committed investment of 3,761 crore, right? So that will basically, also invested by the companies, and that will also generate, lot of employment of for around 3,825 people. So it will have, other benefit like, investment as well as the employment generation for around 3,825 people in this, in this greenfield project. So you can see this is basically, these are basically medicines, right? Next, Shram Shakti. So first of all, you must understand it is basically a portal. So Shram Shakti, it is basically a portal, right, which is associated with the tribals. So first of all, the Union Minister of Tribal Affairs basically launched this portal, which is known as Shram Shakti, right? So here a national migration support portal. So it is named at the National Migration Support Portal at the program, right, which was held as Panjim, Goa, right? So here this portal was launched, right? Basically a program which was held at Goa, and ultimate purpose was to support the tribal people or the tribal who basically migrate in search of employment and other income generation, activities. So this portal is basically, going to be benefiting, those tribals who basically, move from one place to another place in search of, basically, employment or income generation activity. So here This portal will have a repository. Repository means that portal will have some sort of a data, right, about the migration trends of the tribal people, right, within our country. And the Shram Shakti portal will be able to successfully able to address the data gap which we are having. So the data is very, data is the new oil where we are lacking, right? So if we collect the data about the tribals, it will be beneficial for us to target them, right? Because we don't have the data, right, about the movement of those tribals, right? If we have the data, we can basically focus on their migratory patterns, as well as focus on better framing of some policies, right, incentivizing the tribals especially for their upliftment, right. And these are basically empowering the migrant workers who generally migrate in search of employment and the income generation activities, right. And the data that will be recorded, right, through this Shram Shakti portal, right, this data is in the form of demographic profile. Demographic means you will have the description about the age, sex, right, sex ratio, right, all sort of a demographic profile. Demographic data will be there. Livelihood options will be there, right. The livelihood dependent options for the tribals to whom they are dependent, basically. The skill mapping and the migration patterns also will be depicted, or will be shown, or will be recorded through this Shram Shakti portal, right. So you can see basically these tribals are basically moving during COVID-19 pandemic. So this data will help to enhance the reach of the government to those tribal people which are in the need of certain assistance. All right, let's understand the next news, that is potash. So everybody knows potash. So first of all, the potash is basically a chemical substance, as you know. And it is, why it is news? It is news because a tripartite agreement was signed. A tripartite a tripartite agreement was signed between the MECL, which is Mineral Exploration Corporation Limited, which is MECL Rajasthan, right, and Rajasthan State Mines and Mineral Limited, that is RSMML, and the Department of Mines and the Geology, Government of Rajasthan. So this tripartite agreement which was signed for taking up the solution mining of the potash. So it will be of greater boon, especially in the region of Assam, where the feasibility studies for exploring of the solution mining of the potash, especially in the region of the in the region called especially in the region in the Rajasthan, will be explored, right. And one more about the significant fact that Rajasthan has the huge potash and the halite resources. So this huge potash and the halite resources are there with the Rajasthan, and it is basically spread across 50,000 square kilometers in the Nagaur and Ganganagar basin. So Nagaur is basically a district in the Rajasthan, and Ganganagar, Sri Ganganagar is also a district in the Rajasthan, right? So here around, for crossing 50,000 square kilometers, the potash and the halite resources are basically spread in the Nagaur Ganganagar basin in the northwest region of, in the Rajasthan, right? Here you see basically, the significance is basically related to the solution mining of potash. And these bedded salt formations which are related to the potash, you know are basically strategic, they are basically strategically useful, right? For, why these salt formations are strategically useful, because you must understand these salt formation are also one form of sedimentary rocks, and so they may have the underground oil storage also. So the feasibility studies will also enhance the likelihood or the chances of finding of the oil storage, underground oil storage. It can be used for the repository for the hydrogen, right, for ammonia, right, and for the helium gas, right, and also the storage for the compressed gas, nuclear waste, isn't it? So it can be used for the storage purpose, like underground oil storage, where we are already making the underground oil storage infrastructure, isn't it? In our country, it can be repository of the hydrogen, for ammonia, for the helium gas, for storage of different type of waste like helium, like nuclear waste, right? And this potash and the sodium chloride from the bedded salt are extensively used in the fertilizer industry, right? So this potash will be used in the fertilizer industry as well as in the chemical industry, as you know. and this would pave the way for the first solution mining project in the country, and that project will generate the employment in the Rajasthan region also. So that will be, economically beneficial for the Rajasthan also. All right, so you can see it is basically it is basically a potash which was mined, right, from the Nagaur Ganganagar basin. All right, next, the air quality management, DSS, for the Delhi, right? So DSS means decision support system. So DSS means it is a decision support system. All right, it is a decision support system. So here, the Commission for Air Quality Management, which is known as CAQM, right, is basically in the NCR region, right, and adjoining areas. Basically, they have started, or the Commission for Air Quality Management has started the process of setting up of the decision support system, right? So this decision support system will have the web, will have the geographical, information system, and will have the multi-model based operational and the planning decision supporting tool. So that will have, the web application, that will have the GIS, and that will have the multi-model based operational and the planning decision support tool. And this tool, which is basically also known as the decision support system, would help immensely in the capturing of the static and the dynamic features of the emission from various sources, because you need to collect the data and you need to exactly quantify, right, the data which is basically coming out from the various sources, isn't it? So here you can see the, under this decision support system, that is called DSS, right, will capture or will cover, the certain sources like industries, transport, power plants, residential, right, the road dust, the agricultural burning, refuse burning, construction dust, the ammonia, the volatile organic compounds, landfill, etc., isn't it? And it will also have the integrated framework to handle both primary and the secondary pollutants. Secondary pollutant, like for example, you can say the tropospheric ozone, right, which is basically very common, especially in the urban areas, right? So the primary pollutants, secondary pollutants, right, using this chemical transport model, so it will handle both type of these pollutants, right, through this chemical support model. And this system would also able to handle the source specific interventions, right? The source which is basically using, right, as I given you that industries, transport, power plants. So source specific interventions will be there, industry specific, transport specific, power plant specific, residential specific, right? So that will have, the much needed, intervention which is needed for controlling such type of things, isn't it? And it is a framework to estimate the benefits of such interventions, and will focus on the presenting of the best result in the comprehensive user friendly format, right, for the different users, which are also called stakeholders in this process. So you see basically, a cloudy weather, which is basically, one type of pollution which is basically very common in Delhi. All right, next, the Sri Somnath Trust. As you know, first of all, the Somnath temple is very famous temple, who was, or the temple was invaded by the invaders, right, many a times, and this temple was reconstructed many times, right? So here, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi basically attended the meeting of the Sri Somnath Trust. So he basically banned to attend the meeting of the trust, and the trustees, right, paid the tribute to late Keshu Bhai Patel, who was basically the ex-chairman of the trust, right? So so here the trustees basically unanimously, choose the Prime Minister Narendra Modi as its next chairman of the trust. That means the Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be next chairperson or the chairman of Sri Somnath Trust, as it is unanimously chosen by the trustees, right? The ultimate purpose is to guide it in the times to come. All right, next, the past chairpersons, you can also look at into the past chairpersons of the Sri Somnath Trust, basically include, the Jam Sahab Digvijay Singh, right, the Kanhaiya Lal Munshi, the former Prime Minister of India, that is, the Moraji Desai, the Jayakrishna Hari Vallabh, the Dinesh Vai Saha, right, the Prasanvandan Mehta, and Keshu Vai Patel, who was basically the well-known, the chairperson. And Somnath temple, let's understand about the brief about Somnath temple. The Somnath temple is also known as the Diopatan. It is known as Diopatan, and it is located in the Prabhas Patan near Birabal in the Saurashtra region or the Saurashtra district on the western coast of Gujarat, right? So it is basically located in the Saurashtra region on the western coast of Gujarat, and and this temple is believed to be the first among 12 Jyotirlinga shrines of Shiva. So it is one among or first among such 12 Jyotirlinga shrines. And as I told you that it was invaded many times by the invaders, so it was reconstructed several times in the past, and has the repeated destructions by the several invaders. And the present temple, which was reconstructed in the Chalukya style of Hindu temple architecture, right, and it was completed in May 1951 itself, right, and the reconstruction was started under the orders of the Home Minister of India, that was basically Vallabhbhai Patel, right. All right, next, the Narendra Luthar. The Narendra Luthar was basically, the man who unraveled the Hyderabad secret, right? And he was basically a civil servant or an IS officer, first of all. So Narendra Luthar was basically an IS officer who basically, unraveled the Hyderabad secret, and he basically died in the Hyderabad. So he was basically born in 1932 and he basically died in 2021. And he was basically a writer, a civil servant, a author, and a columnist, right? And he was basically a 1955 a batch IS officer, and he was basically served various positions, right, and including the chief secretary of the Andhra Pradesh in 1991, right. He was basically chief secretary in 1991 of the undivided Andhra Pradesh, and he basically worked on the history, the culture of erstwhile Hyderabad state, right, and its rulers since the city's birth in 1591, right. So he has extensively written, right, to redevelopment of the history and to written extensively on the culture of the Hyderabad state. And he was also the president of the Society to Save Rocks in Hyderabad. And he was basically a naturalist to the core, right? And he was moved by the Hyderabad's unique rock formations, right? That took millions of years to shape in the present form. And he was also instrumental, or he helped in bringing some of the geological formations under Urban Development Authority regulations in 1981, right. So he was instrumental of bringing many such geological formations, right, under development authority, so that it can be conserved further, right. That's all for the today. And thank you very much those who attended this session. We'll meet again tomorrow for the new current affairs. So thank you very much for this class. Thank you.